Lesson 5.4, Solving Compound Inequalities that use the word and. Our essential question says, what are the three types of graphs that may represent a compound and inequality? A compound inequality, this is our first new vocabulary word. A compound inequality, if you think about a compound word is something like backyard, where the word is made up of two words that could stand on their own. So like backyard, the word back is a word and the word yard is a word, and you put them together to make a new word that's called a compound word. So a compound inequality is formed when you put together two inequalities. So compound inequality is formed by putting together two inequalities. We are going to learn about compound inequalities that are separated by the word and today. The word and represents what we could call an intersection of two sets. The Venn diagram that I've drawn has two overlapping circles in it, and in the section where they overlap, that area is called the intersection. So the part that I shaded in blue is a piece of each of the circles. It's where they overlap with each other, or it's the part that they share. That would be the intersection. To ride without a car seat, a child must be at least 8 years old and at least 57 inches tall. What is the significance of the word and? So this situation, we are presenting a real world example of where you would work with inequalities. And in the state of Minnesota, the seatbelt and car seat rules have changed over the years. So this is, I believe, the current rule for children riding in a car seat or a booster seat. So in my Venn diagram, I'm showing you that in the circle on the left, those would be the children that have an age greater than or equal to 8 years old. And the circle that's on the right says height is greater than or equal to 57 inches. And then down below it says shade the intersection of the two sets. So if I shade the intersection piece, just like we did on your vocab, you should be able to answer the question, what is the significance of the word and? That word and means that you have to meet both of the requirements. Both of those things have to be true in order for you to be able to ride without a car seat. You have to be both 8 years or older and 57 inches or taller. If you meet both of the requirements, you don't need a car seat or a booster seat. So the significance of the word and is that both of those are required. The next example, very similar. To be eligible for the presidency of the United States, a person must be an American-born citizen and at least 35 years of age. So the people in the intersection of those two sets are the people that are eligible to run for president. They have to be American-born citizens and they have to be 35 or older. So both are required.
Union recap meeting is being held right now in A105. Union recap meeting being held right now in room A105, and there is free popcorn.
Okay, now we're going to shift over and away from those real world kind of examples, we're going to shift over to working with some inequalities and some number line graphs. So this one says type 1. Type 1 is an interval graph. our graph, it says we need to graph x is greater than 1 and x is less than or equal to 5. So on my number lines, I'm going to number from 1 to 5. I'm going to do this on all of my number lines. And you may notice that I am making sure that my number lines are lined up because it's going to be easier for me to work with if they're lined up. So x is greater than 1 would be an open circle, and the numbers get larger to the right. So that is x is greater than 1. X is less than or equal to 5 is going to be a closed circle because of the line underneath, right here in the symbol. And less than or equal to goes to the left. Now, the compound inequality that combines these two inequalities together has the word and separating it. So I need to know what numbers would meet the criteria that they are on my first ray and my second ray. So I am looking for where my rays overlap. That's what I'm looking for. What do they have in common? I see starting here where I've got the number 1 and ending over here where I've got the 5, I've got this area on both of the rays. Both of the rays. My first ray has some points, it continues on to the right, but my second ray does not. My second ray continues on to the left, first ray does not. So where they overlap to me starts at the open circle on the 1, and it ends at the closed circle on the 5. So this is why we call it an interval graph. When the rays cross over each other, and you're looking for a solution set of values that are on the first ray and the second ray, where they overlap each other, is going to form an interval. Now I could name my interval. My interval is starting at 1 and ending at 5. My variable is going to go in the middle because it's anywhere from 1 to 5. And I would need a less than and then a less than or equal to symbol, because what's happening is if I'm putting my variable in the middle, I'm taking this x is greater than 1, and you should see right here, 1 is less than x, which is equivalent. And then my second one, x is less than or equal to 5, you can see right here, x is less than or equal to 5. So by putting them together and using the variable x only once, I'm just flipping around the first inequality to get the x in the middle and writing it as a compound inequality or an interval. Type 2 is going to be a ray. If I graph these, I'm going to line up my number lines again. So -1 to +3 I need this time. Going to graph them individually, and then I'm going to think about what they look like if I combine them. So greater than -1, open circle to the right, greater than or equal to 3, closed circle to the right. So what happens if I put them together as a compound inequality? Look at where they overlap. It starts at the number 3 and continues on forever in the positive direction. So really, my compound inequality is just x is greater than or equal to 3. Because where they overlap starts at the 3 and continues on forever. So combining these two rays leaves me with a ray. So the first one, it left me with an interval where they overlapped. This one leaves me with a ray. And then the third one is an empty set, And the reason that it's an empty set is that if you graph these and look at these, they do not overlap at all. So if my requirement is greater than 6 and less than 2, there are no numbers. There aren't any numbers in existence that are both greater than 6 and less than 2 at the same time. That's impossible. It's impossible. If you pick a number greater than 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and so on, none of those numbers are less than 2. So this one is an empty set. So we've had 3 different types. We had the first type, an interval, that's the most common. Second, array, and third, an empty set. Now in your homework problems, you are going to need to do some solving first. So this problem is illustrating that you would have to solve it first to get your inequality. So this inequality would be x is less than or equal to 1. And my second one, if I solve, I get x is greater than or equal to 4. Now I'm ready to graph, so I need to go from 1 to 4. And my first one is going to be less than or equal to 1. Second one, greater than or equal to 4. And we're separated by the word and here. So these do not overlap at all. They have nothing in common. There aren't any numbers. So it's an empty set. There aren't any numbers that are less than or equal to 1 and greater than or equal to 4. This next one, it says solve and graph. This is set up as an interval right now. So what I'm going to show you is that if I treat this as 2 separate inequalities, like 2 separate train tracks, I can actually solve it at the same time. I don't have to split it into 2 separate inequalities. To get the x by itself, I would need to add 3. So with this compound inequality, I need to add that 3 on the right and on the left. So I will get positive 1 is less than or equal to x, which is less than 7. So I can keep this an interval, and I can graph it. I don't have to split it. My first symbol is going to mean that I have a closed circle on 1, because it's got this line underneath. My second symbol doesn't have a line underneath, so it's open, and interval graphs, you connect in between. So, 1 is less than or equal to x, which is less than 7. Remember that if we look at it separately, this is the same as x is greater than or equal to 1, which would be y from the 1 greater than or equal to would be going to the right. The second one, you can see x is less than 7 would be open, less than goes to the left. So you see how my interval matches where those 2 rays overlap with each other. So you can either separate them and treat them as 2 separate inequalities with the word and, or you can keep it an interval and graph it as an interval. One more, I'm going to keep as an interval again. To get the x by itself, I subtract 1. So I subtract it on the right and left. And then I divide by 2. So divide on the left and on the right. So 4 divided by 2 is 2, and 8 divided by 2 is 4. So my interval goes from 2 to 4. My circle over here is going to be closed on the 2, then open on the 4, connected in between. Again, if I wanted to separate it, this inequality, 2 is less than or equal to x, it's the exact same as x is greater than or equal to 2. So greater than or equal to 2. And the second one, x is less than 4. would look like this. So again, you should be able to see that where they overlap is the interval that I have graphed in blue. So if you prefer to write the inequalities separately, you can do that. You can do that. So right here at the beginning, if you wanted to write them separately, here's what the problem would look like.
Emily Dunham, please call extension 6801, Emily Dunham, 6801.
That middle piece, you would just have to use in each of your inequalities, like that. So if you prefer to solve it separately, you can do that. Just make sure you have the word and connecting it. Otherwise, you can leave it together as an interval. You should be able to write your summary now. The 3 types of graphs that may represent a compound and inequality are, and check the homework calendar on our website to find out what your homework assignment is. So this is chapter 5 for algebra with stats, and it was lesson 5 for day 1. So check algebra with stats homework calendars.